What really happened in the Alaska woods? The moment no one else was there to see. A quiet campsite. A couple who looked completely in love. And by morning, only one of them was speaking. June 14, 2:18 p.m. Denali Highway, Alaska. They arrived like any other couple chasing peace. Paul Ken carried the gear. Rosie Ken smiled at passing hikers. To strangers, they looked effortless, calm, almost perfect. But perfection doesn't ask for help. Vanessa Clark would later say Rosie sounded different the night before the trip. Not scared, not panicked, just careful with her words. Last call. 9:42 p.m. She said she'd call me when they got back. Vanessa told investigators. She always called me. She never did. Next morning, 7:10 a.m., a ranger driving past the campsite noticed something small. Something most people would ignore. Paul was alone. No panic. No urgency. Just standing there, staring toward the trees. Paul Ken. When help arrived, his story was simple. They argued. She walked off. He thought she needed space. But one detail didn't sit right. Rosie didn't leave without her phone. She didn't leave without her shoes. And she never ignored a call. But one detail didn't add up. There were no footprints leading away from the site. Not one. So if Rosie didn't walk into those woods, then where did she go? And why was Paul already acting like he knew she wasn't coming back? Why did his story stay calm, while everything around him didn't? 11:06 a.m. Search teams moved fast. The woods weren't dense enough to hide someone for long. They called her name. Again. Nothing answered back. Search zone expanded. Paul repeated the same version. She walked off. She needed space. No shaking voice. No confusion. Just control. Detective Aaron Whitlock noticed it immediately. Grief usually breaks people. But Paul stayed measured. Paul Ken. Then something shifted. A ranger pointed to the edge of the campsite. The ground looked disturbed. Not scattered, not natural. Pressed down, like weight had been forced into one place. No clear trail. No struggle marks stretching outward. Just one area. That didn't belong. But one detail didn't add up. If Rosie walked away, why did the ground say she didn't? 3 hours later, Paul changed one small thing. He said the argument was worse than he first admitted. That she was emotional. That she needed distance. But Rosie wasn't known for disappearing. Vanessa Clark confirmed it. She never shuts people out like that. Never. So now the question wasn't just where is Rosie? It became something harder to ignore. Why was Paul adjusting his story before anyone accused him of anything? Why did another woman recognize the story before anyone else did? 2 days later, Anchorage. Her name was Kate Harlow. She wasn't part of the search. She wasn't on the news. But when she heard Paul's version, she went still. Not surprised. Not confused. Just familiar. Witness steps forward. "I've heard this before," she said quietly. Same tone. Same calm explanation. Same way of making everything sound reasonable. Until it wasn't. Kate didn't describe one moment. She described a pattern. Control disguised as care. Arguments that ended with silence. Apologies that felt rehearsed. And one detail she couldn't forget. He never loses control in front of people. Only when no one is watching. Pattern of behavior. Detective Brianna Cole wrote one line in her notes. This isn't about one night. Back in Alaska, the search was slowing. No voice. No movement. No trace. But now something else had surfaced. A possibility that Rosie didn't just vanish. She was left somewhere no one had thought to look. But one question stayed. If Paul had done this before, even in smaller ways, then why did this time end in silence? Why did her silence feel louder the closer they looked? The crews returned to the same ground. Not because they found something, but because something felt wrong the first time. They slowed down, measured every step. Then, a section near the treeline. Slightly uneven, recently disturbed. Not obvious, but not natural either. No one spoke at first. They didn't need to. Rosie hadn't walked away. She had been left there. The woods went quiet in a different way now. Not searching anymore. Just confirming what no one wanted to say out loud. Back at the station, Paul was told. He didn't ask where. He didn't ask how. Just one question. Are you sure it's her? But one detail didn't sit right. Most people beg for answers. Paul asked for confirmation, like he already knew what they were going to find. Shift in investigation. Detective Aaron Whitlock didn't look at the map anymore. He looked at Paul. Because this wasn't about a missing person now. It was about a man who stood in the same place and said nothing while she was already gone. What if the truth wasn't hidden in the forest, but already documented before anyone started searching? Alaska State Lab. The room was too quiet for what it held. Rosie Ken was no longer a missing person, no longer a search file. Now, she was evidence. Dr. Leonard Briggs reviewed the findings slowly. Not rushing, not guessing, just confirming what the body already said. Time of death estimate. During camping trip, there was no ambiguity in the timeline. No gap big enough for escape. No window for disappearance. Just one conclusion forming too clearly to ignore. And then came the detail that changed everything. Not a struggle in the woods. Not an accident. Not a wandering victim. But injuries that told a different story. One that didn't match Paul's calm explanation at all. Detective Brianna Cole wrote only 3 words in her file. She didn't leave. But one detail didn't add up. If Rosie never walked away, then Paul's entire version of that night was built on something else. Not confusion, but design. Interrogation notice issued. Paul didn't react when the report was mentioned. He just sat there, waiting, like the answer had already arrived. And he was simply being asked to confirm it. Why did the last 24 hours of her life look nothing like the story he told? Cell phone data recovery, Anchorage Tech Unit. Rosie Ken's phone didn't die in the forest. It stayed active longer than expected. Long enough to leave something behind. The map didn't show panic. It showed movement that stopped, then never resumed. One fixed point near the campsite. No wandering. No escape pattern, just stillness. Last active signal. 10:18 p.m. Detective Aaron Whitlock stared at the screen longer than he should have. Because that time didn't match Paul's version. Not even close. But one detail didn't add up. Paul said she left after an argument. But the phone stayed right where the campsite was. Which meant she never went anywhere at all. Kate Harlow. Kate's voice came back into the case file. She always tried to make things work, even when it hurt her. That line changed everything. Because now the question wasn't why did she leave? It was, what stopped her from ever getting the chance? The investigation stopped treating Rosie like someone who disappeared, and started treating that night like a moment that ended too fast to be explained away. Why did his first calm sentence sound like it already knew the ending? Anchorage Police Department. Paul Ken didn't panic. He didn't raise his voice. He just repeated the same version. One more time. She walked off. I thought she needed space. But now the room had changed. No longer searching for a missing wife. No longer testing a theory. They were measuring a lie. Conflicting evidence. The phone data. The ground report. The autopsy timeline. Kate Harlow's statement. All pointing in one direction. Away from his words. But one detail didn't add up. If Rosie left the campsite, she would have left evidence of leaving. But she didn't. And Paul was the only person whose story required her to disappear quietly. Detective Aaron Whitlock finally spoke. There was no walk into the woods. Because there was no leaving the campsite at all. Silence followed. Not emotional. Final. The court didn't need imagination. Just consistency. And Paul's story didn't survive contact with the facts. He was sentenced to life in prison. Designated a dangerous offender. Case closed. Rosie Ken never walked away. She was never lost. She was taken in the one place she thought was safe. And the truth didn't come from one moment. It came from every detail that refused to lie together. Sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones told calmly. Because calm can hide everything until it can't anymore. Subscribe to The Veil of Secret for more true crime cases that expose the truth behind silence and the stories people never saw coming.